to slash drug prices by 200%, 300%, 400%, 500%, 600%, 700%, 800%. Nobody's ever heard of it before.
A president claiming that drug prices in the US have fallen by 500%, 600%, even 700%. It sounds more like an internet joke than the words of a head of government. He insisted that because he activated something called the favored nation rule, drug prices in the US have dropped to historic lows. If someone has never bought medicine before, they might think Trump had just pulled off a medical revolution. But with basic math alone, you can see how absurd the story is. A $10 bottle of Advil reduced by 500% means the buyer should receive $40. A 600% reduction means getting $50 back. And in other words, according to Trump's logic, pharmacies in the US are now handing out cash to customers, and the more they buy, the more they get paid. No one in the US gets paid to buy medicine. No pharmaceutical company is randomly giving away money. And there is certainly no policy from the White House making that happen. Yet Trump still presents it as if it were a historic victory for his administration. The question is, does Trump truly not know? Or does he think his supporters don't? Because his team, his advisors, his experts, none of them are incapable of 5th grade math. They all know that 500, 700% is impossible. And because they know, the only reasonable explanation for this story is Trump believes his supporters will swallow the claim without questioning it. Netting in the video commentary, the host asks a blunt question. If someone thinks so little of you that they believe you'll accept something that ridiculous, does that person deserve your support? This is not just a question about policy. It is a question about voter dignity. The dignity of people who have the right to choose and the right to refuse. Beyond the fantasy numbers, Trump continued bragging that a policy he signed forced drug companies to cut prices. But when you look at the actual legal document, the truth is the exact opposite. The so-called drug pricing executive order merely allowed drug companies to voluntarily lower prices. The key word here is voluntarily. An industry that has raised prices steadily, aggressively, and exploitatively for over 3 decades does not wait for a president to say, you are now allowed to reduce prices. They don't need permission, and they certainly have no economic incentive to cut their own profits. What Trump signed was a piece of paper with no enforcement power, no teeth, and no binding clauses, a PR document designed to produce a nice headline, not real change. And the clearest proof came the very day the order was signed. If the order actually forced drug companies to reduce prices, their stocks should have plummeted because future profits would be hurt. But what happened was the exact opposite. On the day Trump signed the order, Gilead went up 7%, Merck up 5%, Pfizer, Bristol Myers, and Amgen rose more than 3%. Eli Lilly rose over 2%. The market never lies. And here, when the market said, drug companies are relieved because this order changes nothing. CNBC analyzed, this executive order is more headline than policy. One expert said plainly, this is political messaging, not an actionable plan. People in the pharmaceutical industry even viewed the order as a gift because it showed Trump had no intention of touching their profits. All of this leads to one clear conclusion. Trump manufactured a fake victory, a victory packed with absurd numbers, presented as a medical revolution, then launched like an arrow aimed at the media and voters. But when you peel off the outside layer, all that remains is emptiness. A non-binding policy, zero impact, on a victory so hollow that pharmaceutical corporations literally celebrated because they weren't affected at all. This is the clearest example of how Trump governs, not through policy, but through political illusion. But that is only the opening act of a pattern that has lasted an entire decade. Trump and the Republican Party don't just exaggerate drug prices, they exaggerate everything, year after year. Trump promised to unveil the greatest healthcare plan in American history. He repeated, in 4 weeks, in 2 weeks, very soon. A great plan is coming.
No choice but to absolutely replace Obamacare, and we're going to come up with a much...
Where do you see the plans we have coming out? Literally,
over the next 4 weeks. We're signing a health care plan within 2 weeks.
Every press conference had a version of that promise, but after 10 years, the American people still have not seen a single plan, not a draft, not a proposal, not even a one-page outline. Nothing. And when asked directly, do you have a plan? What Trump simply said, I have a concept of a plan. That is not how a president works. That is how someone stalls for time while hiding the fact that he never intended to deliver real policy. Now, the Republican Party isn't any better. So over the past 10 years, they tried 77 times to repeal Obamacare, but had no replacement. With every failure, I thought they promised to introduce a much better plan, but all voters ever received were empty votes and hollow declarations. Worse, in recent proposals, they pushed a bill that would cut Medicaid from 17 million people, a direct threat to the poorest families, the people who need medical assistance the most. Republicans were even willing to shut down the government just to force Democrats to eliminate ACA subsidies. If that happened, by 2026, insurance premiums in the US could multiply by 2, 3, or even 5 times. That is not a plan to improve healthcare. It is a plan to strip access from millions. Meanwhile, Trump continues to call himself the president of savings. He says he fights for lower prices, for American families struggling through economic hardship, but reality is the opposite. In just 11 months in office, electricity prices rose, food prices rose, clothing prices rose, car prices rose, rent rose, home prices rose, construction materials rose. Everything rose, except Trump's words. He kept insisting he was making America more affordable, while American families paid more for everything from electric bills to daily meals. These contradictions aren't accidents, though they are trademarks of Trump. He creates a version of America that exists only in his words. In that version, when he made drug prices drop to historic lows, no matter what math or evidence says, in that version, he has a wonderful healthcare plan, even though it never existed. In that version, every failure is a triumph. Every broken promise is retold as an achievement. And in that version, Americans are expected to believe everything he says, regardless of the facts staring them in the face. But what he didn't expect is that more Americans are stepping out of the version of America he created. They see prices rising every day and no longer believe in promises of affordability. They see pharmaceutical companies celebrating his executive order, and they know no reform is happening. They see that after 10 years of promising a healthcare plan, all they got was a hollow sentence. I have a concept of a plan. And most importantly, they realize that blind loyalty to a leader brings nothing but disappointment. That is why in recent elections, something notable happened. People who voted for Trump in 2024 are now shifting toward Democrats. Not because they suddenly love another politician, but because they are exhausted from being deceived. They believed Trump once, but when they saw prices keep rising, policies never appear, and chaos escalate, they began to walk away. This is something Trump cannot fix with PR. No Truth Social post can save him from this. When life becomes more expensive, when promises crumble, when reality hits, no media trick can cover it. Just look at how Trump responds. He doesn't change policy. He doesn't offer new plans. He doesn't correct course. He only increases the declarations, increases the boasting, increases the list of victories that do not exist. That is his way. When reality turns against him, he does not change reality. He tries to change perception. But the problem is, people have stopped listening to him and started looking at their own bills. Americans today don't need CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News to know how the economy is doing. They only need to look at the supermarket, the gas station, the electric bill. They only need to look at rising medical costs. They only need to look at the gap between promises and their real lives. And that gap is growing. This brings us back to a critical point. Trump values image over policy. And that image is now backfiring. Yet because America is no longer in an era where presidents can say anything without being fact-checked. We live in a time where data on prices, policies, And economic impact is clear and accessible. If a president claims drug prices are down 700%, but people still pay more at the pharmacy, that lie evaporates instantly. If he claims he saved the healthcare system, but premiums are about to double, triple, or quintuple, people will see the truth without any reporter pointing it out. And that is what erodes trust. Trump expects his supporters to remain loyal no matter how harsh reality becomes. But he forgets something. Loyalty cannot survive repeated betrayal. The video host said it well. You don't owe any politician your support. That means if Trump lies too many times, if he insults your intelligence, if he demands that you trust his words instead of your own lived experience, you have every right to walk away. That is why recent elections carry a frightening message for Trump. Americans are no longer afraid to admit they were fooled. They are no longer ashamed to abandon a leader they once supported. They are willing to shift course when necessary. What Trump didn't anticipate is that this shift isn't happening in political laboratories. It's happening in kitchens, where food prices rise every week. It's happening in hospitals, where medical bills grow heavier. It's happening in real life, where PR tricks cannot twist people's perception. All of this brings us back to the original story, the story of drug prices. It is not just a story about 500 or 700%. It is a story about the contempt for people's intelligence, about a leadership model built on declarations rather than actions, and about an administration that puts image over reality. If Trump is willing to say something so absurd without fear of being contradicted, it means he believes people won't question him. But when people begin questioning, when skepticism emerges, when they realize something is wrong, that becomes Trump's greatest threat. A president can hide the truth for a while, but not forever. And what's happening now proves it. People are becoming more alert, more cautious, harder to manipulate. They see the gap between words and actions. They see the inconsistency in every claim. They see the emptiness behind every self-proclaimed victory. And once trust is shaken, stories like 700% drug price cuts no longer excite them. They make them laugh, then quietly walk away. This pattern is repeating across many sectors: the economy, healthcare, energy, foreign policy, grand promises with hollow centers, dramatic declarations without policy, victories only Trump can see. And in the end, only one question remains, or the question the video host asked. If a leader thinks so little of you that he believes you will accept something that absurd, is that someone you should continue to support? That question isn't just for people who once backed Trump. It's for every American voter, in every election, at every moment. Because democracy survives only when people refuse to give unconditional loyalty to anyone. And the moment people stand up, look reality in the eye, and say, "No, I don't accept this," that is the moment real power returns to them.